The Mercedes-Benz Interview Lounge.
Most of us are still at home doing the show. This has been going on for way over a year and a half at this point. COVID attacked us and still does to this day. And just when we thought we could ease up, have some fun, it looks as if it's turning a different direction. And so U.S. Surgeon General Dr. Vivek Murthy is with us. And we thought we'd go right to the top. And you said, simply put, health misinformation is costing us lives. Nearly every death we are seeing today from COVID-19 could have been avoided. Dr. Murthy, thanks for coming on today. Tell us where you want to start.
Well, Elvis, first, it's great to be with you this morning. And you mentioned health misinformation. Let me just say a word about why I'm so concerned about that. You know, as a doctor, I've spent many visits with patients over the years, helping them sort through the information they're getting online from friends and from their healthcare professionals. And it's getting harder and harder to figure out what's true and what's not. Health misinformation in and of itself isn't new, but what is new is the speed and the scale and the sophistication with which it's spreading, particularly through social media. And so one of the things that we've realized, especially during COVID, is that misinformation is costing people their lives and harming their health, because many people are even doubting whether COVID's real because they've come across misinformation that calls this illness into question. And let me just tell you, in case you come across that, it is real. But also when it comes to the vaccines, what we've seen is that there are a lot of myths out there about the vaccines, and about 2/3 of people who are unvaccinated either believe some of those common myths or think they might be true, and because they've often seen it on social media. So we've got to address this health misinformation. The key way to do it is to be careful about what we share online. If you're not sure if it's coming from a reputable, credible scientific source, then don't share. But we've also got to ask our technology companies to step up and do more to prevent the spread of misinformation. That's one of the things that I did 2 weeks ago when I issued the first Surgeon General's advisory on combating health misinformation.
You know, it's a sad story to see, and we're seeing it more and more. Patients in hospitals in very bad shape and actually begging for the vaccine, and it's very, very late in the game for them. It's sometimes too late, but it's still not enough. It's still not working. And I know that as we see the stories, we see hospitals are filling up more and more. At the same time, we're all still kind of going out and taking our chances. We were taking these calculated risks. And I know a lot of my friends as of this weekend are saying, you know what, I'm putting the mask back on when I'm inside. I'm going to make sure that, I talk to my friends one by one that have not been vaccinated and tell them about how important it is to reconsider. What are you finding? Because you're seeing it from the broad stroke. You're seeing all of us. You're seeing an entire country being affected. What do you want us to do? What can we do? Everyone listening right now.
Let me just say, first of all, that I understand people's fatigue and frustration. We've been at this for 18 months, and this pandemic has turned our lives upside down. Some of us have had our kids, not be in school, and we've had to figure out how to virtually school them. Others have lost their jobs, and many others have lost family members and friends. So this has been really tough. So I just want to say, first of all, that I appreciate how difficult this has been, but I also want people not to forget all the progress we've made over the last year, in particular, since the vaccines became available. Because of the vaccines, we've actually saved more than 100,000 lives. We've prevented hundreds of thousands of hospitalizations. And that's one thing that hasn't changed, even with this recent guidance around masks, which we'll talk about, which is that the vaccines are still remarkably effective at preventing death and preventing serious illness and hospitalizations. That is the most important reason to still get vaccinated today. But what we learned about this Delta variant, this new, more transmissible variant that spread like wildfire in the country, is that in the unusual cases where people have breakthrough infections, so the small number of vaccinated folks who might get an infection, they actually seem to be able to transmit the virus to other people, which is different from other versions or variants of COVID-19. And that's the reason the CDC recommended that out of an abundance of caution, that even if you're fully vaccinated, that you put your mask back on in indoor spaces outside of your household to help prevent the transmission to other people. Because so you take someone like me, for example, I'm a dad, I've got 2 small kids at home. They're not vaccinated because they're not eligible yet to get vaccinated. I don't want to pass on something to my children, even though I'm fully vaccinated. And even though there's a small chance I might pick up the infection from someone else. I want to reduce that risk even further. That's why I wear a mask when I go to the grocery store or other indoor settings that are outside of my house. And then I don't wear a mask when I'm indoors. So what I think we're asking everyone to do is, number one, get vaccinated first and foremost if you haven't. It's the best way to stop this pandemic. Number two, if you are vaccinated, make sure you're wearing a mask in indoor spaces outside of your house so that you can help reduce the spread to others, especially in your family. And finally, just remember this, calling your family and friends, asking them if they've been vaccinated and urging them to do so is one of the most important things you could also do, because that's ultimately how we're going to get our whole country vaccinated.
Doctor, I've seen where some people have said once they have had COVID, they've had the antibodies and you're supposed to wait a little bit to get vaccinated and whatnot. How effective are the antibodies from having COVID the first time versus against the Delta variant?
Well, I'm so glad you asked that, Elvis. So first of all, if you have COVID, you don't need to wait that long to get vaccinated. You want to get out of your period of isolation, which is around 10 days. But after that, you can get vaccinated. And here's why it's important to get vaccinated, even if you've had COVID. You probably do have some level of protection from natural infection, but we, one, are not sure how long that protection lasts. There certainly have been cases of people who have been reinfected. The second thing to know is that in the studies they've done, it looks like with the vaccine, you actually get higher levels of what are called neutralizing antibodies. These are the soldiers that your body builds to help fight infection. You have higher levels of those than people tend to have on average with natural infection. And why is that important? Because as we've seen these new variants develop, we actually need, it turns out, more soldiers in our body, higher levels of antibody to fend them off. And so having a higher titer through vaccination is at this point the safest way we know to protect you from infection, even if you've been infected with COVID before.
By the way, this is U.S. Surgeon General Dr. Vivek Murthy talking about the obvious. And so many people are texting in questions. Danielle, you had one as well?
Yeah. So my question is, what do you say to people who say, okay, so we got to a point where we thought we were okay, and now we have another variant. And now what's going to happen? Do we keep getting variant after variant after variant? When does it stop?
Yeah, it's the right question to ask. And we have seen a number of variants. Some have cropped up here in the United States, some have come up in other countries. But in the world we live in, these variants travel all over. And they'll go to come to our country even if they haven't started here. The reason these keep developing is because we have uncontrolled spread of the virus. See, the virus can only mutate when it's replicating inside your body. If people are protected from the virus because they're immunized, it has fewer places to hide and to replicate and to mutate. So one of the keys to getting variants to reduce in frequency is to reduce the level of infection. And the key to doing that is vaccination. But the key also here is not just vaccination in the United States. We've actually got to help vaccinate the rest of the world because variants elsewhere can come here. And that's why the steps the United States has taken to not only donate now more than 580 million doses committed to other countries from our own supply, but the steps we've also taken to work with companies like Pfizer and Moderna to help produce more vaccine for the rest of the world. Those are really, really important steps because this is a global pandemic. We only get through it with global cooperation and action.
Wow.
I have a question as far as where are we with this third booster shot, or is there going to be a booster shot, and how will that affect people who had the Pfizer vaccine versus the Moderna vaccine or even Johnson & Johnson?
Well, gosh, that's a really timely question as well. And we are looking actively at a number of different data sources to understand if and when boosters are needed. And what we're particularly looking at is we're trying to see if there's evidence of immunity or protection declining over time, and if that manifests as an increase in breakthrough infections. And that's when we would say, okay, a booster may be indicated is if you see that decrease in immunity sufficient to cause more infection. Now, there are some data sources that you may have seen in the news from Israel and from other places which have indicated that immunity may be waning. There are other sources which don't necessarily corroborate that. What we've got to do is look at all of the data together and then make a decision, data from the United States and from other countries. And my suspicion is that, we're going to get, there pretty soon because we're getting more and more data every day, and that's going to be helpful to us. But I think everyone should be prepared that there may, in fact, be boosters required. But the good news is that if they are required, we will be ready as a country to get them to people where they are, and we will have enough supply. So that is the good news about it.
Dr. Morthy, again, thanks for coming on with us today. I know you have a few things on your plate. What is your response to people who we meet every day listening to our show, who just, even though I'm holding up a mile-long list of your degrees and everything that's brought you to where you are on your journey in your professional life today, what is our response to them when they're like, I don't believe it? And they have zero medical training. They just don't believe it because of misinformation or because they don't want to believe it or whatever. How do we convince them to, hey, let's give science and the professionals our ear and believe in what they're saying as our chance to get out of this?
Well, it's such an important question. It's a really hard one right now, because what's happened is the amount of misinformation that's flowing has dramatically increased. And here's the other interesting and disturbing thing about misinformation is it tends to flourish, particularly in environments that are polarized, right? So when you're, in a society where, people are divided and they're pitted against each other, then often what happens is our minds work in such a way that we will look for information that confirms our fears or our biases or supports our anger or resentment, even if that's not factually accurate. And that doesn't mean that we're bad people. That's just the nature of human psychology. And we're seeing a confluence of these factors right now. But here's what we realize is really important if we want to get the facts to people. We've, number one, got to recognize that not everyone trusts the same sources. That people listen to different people, and they need to absorb information in different ways. And some of the most powerful individuals who can help get accurate information to people are doctors and nurses, family members, and friends. And I'm not saying that because it actually sounds good. It actually has been proven time and time again in surveys and studies that have been done. In fact, if you look at people in January who said that they were on the fence about getting the vaccine, and then those who changed their mind and you ask them why they changed their mind, the studies actually show that it was a conversation with a family member or friend or with a doctor or other health professional that changed their mind. And it was seeing the experience that their family members had with the vaccine, recognizing that actually they did fine with it. That ultimately changed their mind too. So I know it's tough, especially when we see how many facts are on the side of getting vaccinated and how much evidence there is that it saves lives, to see people saying no to the vaccine. But we've got to recognize that a lot of people are flooded with inaccurate information. And we, as their family members and friends, as trusted voices, we can help cut through that noise. If we listen, if we offer our opinions, with humility, and if we don't give up on them.
Such an honor to have you here. U.S. Surgeon General Dr. Vivek Murthy, thank you for your time. And don't give up on us. Stay with us. And let's get through this. Thank you very much. Have a very nice weekend, okay?
Thanks so much, Elvis. You have a good weekend too, and we will get through this pandemic. We'll do it together, but we will get through it.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Murthy. Thank you very much.
The Mercedes-Benz Interview Lounge.